Welcome to Lockdown Minis. I'm Richard, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I paint my Ultramarines, only in this video I'm going to be using a brush only. If you want to see how to do this with an airbrush, I've also recorded a video for that, and I'll include the link within this video as well. It should be on the screen now, as well as a link to the conclusion of airbrush versus bristle brush. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to use some cutters as always. I'm just going to cut this model out as gently as possible from the sprues. I'll do this with all the parts of the model before using some tools to neaten it up. Now we've got all the pieces cut out, I'm going to be using a nail file and also a blade just to get rid of any mold lines, but also get rid of any loose ends, tags and whatnot. I'm also going to be spending a little time here to drill the gun barrel. I just think this adds a little bit extra to the model. Now that the model's assembled, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some Tamiya soil effect dark earth to the base, just to give it a bit of texture. This is basically a textured paint. If you want to see more on how I use this in bases, I've got a base tutorial for these Ultramarines, which I'll include a link. It should be on your screen now. As I'm going to be using no airbrush for this video, I decided I was going to use a Citadel rattle can, just to make sure that there's no airbrush whatsoever used here. And I'm going to prime the model in black using one of these, one of the rattle cans. Big tip for using one of these rattle cans is try and do your spraying in bursts, and that'll just avoid any overspray on the model and make sure that as much detail as possible remains. Now let's get onto the brush, and the first thing to do is to add 2 thin coats of Foliage's Ultramarine Blue. Make sure this is applied all over the model. For the next step, we're going to be using Electric Blue by Vallejo to add some highlights to the armour. To do this, we're going to be using a dry brush, and I'm using an extra small dry brush. For this, we're only going to be applying this with downward strokes on the armour, and applying it to where we think that the light's going to hit this armour. So on the upper areas of the shoulder pads, the wrist guards, and on the side of the legs. So now the highlights are complete, you've probably noticed that the model itself and the armor is looking too bright. And that's fine, that's the way that it's meant to look at this stage. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add on a shade over this, just to dumb that down, but also to bring the tones in those two different shades of blue together. What I use for this is I use Drakenhof Nightshade, and this is a 50-50 mix with Drakenhof Nightshade and water, and I'll apply this quite liberally over the whole entire model. Now we're going to use some black paint, and we're just going to pick out all of the areas that we want to be leaving black. So parts of the gun, some of the material on the belt, and also the almost like tubing that's between the joints in the armor. Anything like that you think should be black, now's the time when we're going to do that. Now that the black's complete, we're going to move on to the gold trim. So we're going to use the same gold for the trim on the shoulder pads, but also for the emblem on the chest. The gold that I'm using is Shimmering Gold by Vallejo, and we're just going to put this straight on, and we'll apply a shade to this later on. Now we're going to move on to some silver by Vallejo, and we're going to touch up any of the metallic areas, so parts of the weapon, belt buckle, just things like that. Whatever you think needs to be silver at this point, what needs to be metallic, we're going to be using this silver by Vallejo just to fill those areas in. For the next part, which is the most time consuming part, we're going to move on to doing a hard edge highlight. For those of you that don't know what an edge highlight is, essentially we're going to highlight just the areas where pieces of armors meet or there's an edge, and we're going to do this by loading our paintbrush up with paint, and we're just going to brush this up against the edge with the side of the brush, not using the tip, just the side of the brush wherever we can. If it's difficult to use the side of the brush, we're going to move and then gently use the tip of the brush. But we need to do this over the entire model, making sure that we touch all of the edges and all of the joints in the armor. We're now going to use some Nuln Oil, and we're going to apply this over any silver areas, but also any gold areas as well. And we're going to put this on quite thick, and then leave it to do its stuff. Nuln Oil is great, and it just sinks right into the recesses and gives a really good shade with minimum effort. Now that the null oil is dry, we're just going to move back to the dry brush, this time with silver, and we're going to just apply this gently over the entire gun. For the lenses on the helmet, I'm going to be using Bloody Red by Vallejo, and later on I'll apply a quick wash of null oil to that, making sure that the null oil doesn't take over too much and plenty of the red still shows through. For the purity seal on the shoulder pad, I'm going to be using Mephiston Red for the waxy stamp, and then for the bits of parchment I'm going to be using Ushabti Bone by Citadel, and later on I'll apply a wash over these as well. The washes I'm going to use for the purity seal are null oil for the wax stamp, and then Seraphim Sepia for the parchment. Moving on to the base, I'm going to be using a really light brown for the base, and then I'm going to darken this down and add some shade with some Citadel shades. I'm going to be using Agrax Earth Shade, but also Seraphim Sepia over the top of this as well. If you want to see a bit more detail how I make these bases, I'll put a link to the base tutorial in the video for you to see. While I'm waiting for the brown on the base to dry, I'm just going to go back with some Ushabti Bone just to add some highlights to the parchment. Now that the brown's dry on the base, we can add the two washes, which is Seraphim Sepia at the front of the base and Agrax Earth Shade at the rear of the base. And then we'll blend them both together in the middle. This just makes the base look like it's darker at the back and lighter at the front. Now with the main part of the base done, I'm just going to finish this with a black rim around the bottom, just with some ordinary black paint. I just think it makes it stand out and makes it look nice and fresh. Now all that's left to do is add some foliage to the base, just so it makes it look like it's a bit more realistic with a bit of grass, and also do the transfers on the mini as well. For the transfers, I'm going to be adding the standard Ultramarines emblem, and also the unit emblem as well on the opposite shoulder pad. Finally, with the transfers on, I'm just going to quickly go over this with a light coat of Null Oil, just to take away that pure white look that they have when they first go on. And here's the finished product. You can't tell the difference between the airbrush, which is the guy holding his gun in the air, and the brush only version. Really easy to do, takes a little bit more time, but the results are equally as good. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button. The only way that I know you guys enjoy what I do is by the number of subscribers I get, but also by the number of likes, so don't forget to hit that thumbs up as well. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and you can also find me on Instagram at lockdown_minis, so look me up there. I'm always posting updates on my latest projects. Thanks very much, I'll see you soon.